I read this book with Chris. We will be discussing So You Want to Be a Wizard by Diane Duane. Drinking The Black Feather. So You Want to Be a Wizard by Diane Duane. This was written in 1983. This edition was printed in 1996. First comparison is Harry Potter. And this has some very similar vibes to Harry Potter, but very different as well. So there is children. In this case, there are two. There is Nita and Kit. Nita, a young girl who is bullied, runs to the library. She stumbles across a book that says, So You Want to Be a Wizard. And she checks it out from the library. She actually ends up stealing it from the library. And it ends up being her copy. The library didn't even know they had it. Luckily enough, she forgot her library card. And since she's at the library all the time, librarian's like, it's fine. Just take it. You'll bring it back. Which she didn't. Which is good because the librarian doesn't know about it. Apparently there are wizards everywhere holding up and together the world. She ends up, soon after finding her book and reading it, there's a oath you have to speak. She speaks it. Next morning wakes up and is able to talk to trees and plants. She stumbles across Kit. His name is Christopher, I believe, which is a great name. He's been a wizard for a little bit longer than her, I believe like a month or so. And he's already done and attempted a few spells. He's not able to talk to plants. He's able to talk to machines and rocks, generally non-living things. And so they end up bringing another creature from another world named Fred, who's actually a white star. And for those of you who don't know physics, or I don't know if white stars are considered still to be a thing, theoretical. White stars were at one point white holes are considered to be the other end of black holes. Black holes bring everything in, compress it, and then the theory went, I don't know if it's still, things come in the black hole, get condensed down, and then the white hole then emits things. And all this energy comes from black holes. They bring this white hole named Fred in, who has conveniently let his mass stay in another place so that the whole world isn't eaten by the mass of Fred, this white hole. There are a couple of weird things. Generally, the idea behind this book is Nita and Kit and Fred go and they're trying to retrieve Nita's space pen, which was stolen, that accidentally gets eaten by Fred. They end up accidentally getting chased through it, and when they are chased through it, they find they're in a world that's controlled by the dark power, the lone power. It's weird. They talk around it. I don't know that he's ever given a name. The lone power is the one who creates death in the world, so it is explained. And this is the part that I find a little weird. And this is 1983, so this was environmentalism. This is sort of like a white-collar environmentalism. It sort of feels like a wizard's business is to conserve energy, to keep it from being wasted. On the simplest level, this includes such unmagical-looking actions as paying one's bills on time, turning off the lights when you go out, and supporting the people around you in getting their lives to work. It also includes a great deal more. The power conferred by the use of speech, of course, has one insurmountable limitation: the existence of death itself. As one renowned senior wizard has remarked, entropy has us outnumbered. No matter how much preserving we do, the universe will eventually die, but it will last longer because of our efforts. It's all about conservation of energy. So they accidentally go through a portal. They're supposed to just go to the portal, and the portal will allow them to access the pen that Fred had eaten. Instead, they're accidentally sent through, and when they're sent through, they have to try to get back. But in order to get back, they need the book of the moonlight, basically, which is the good book. And they do spells to try to figure out where it is, and they can find that there's both a good book, but also in this universe that they've gone through, that they've entered in through this portal, there's also the dark book. The dark book was the lone one's way to, basically their evil version of the book. The good book, the book of the light of the moonlight, the book of the light of the moon, describes and names everything in the universe, including the lone one, including Manhattan, including all of these things. This book is set in New York. But these books are tied together. This book of the light of the moon that can only be read in moonlight, and this dark book. So they can't really access Moonlight Book is, but they can see where the Dark Book is. So they go up, and through their magic, they're able to go up the skyscraper and find a couple things that I found weird. And so this is how they describe the lone power. So it's in this world, this New York, where everything is dead. There are pigeons and dogs. Those are the only life forms alive. And they see a pigeon get eaten by a fire hydrant. There are also taxi cabs, which have become feral and start chasing them down and start eating them. Kit befriends some sort of, not a race car, but like a high-end car that, because it's so rare, is like the lion, it's the top-end predator. And he goes and eats taxi cabs. But he got hurt, and Kit, being the person who's able to talk to, sees it and is able to save it, and so befriends it. This race car takes them to the skyscraper. So all of New York is dark, no energy, there's the skyscraper. That when they get to it, they see it actually has electricity. It has elevators that work. It has lights that are on. They go up to the top trying to find this book. There are bookcases everywhere, books everywhere, all about, super high-end magic stuff. A lot of law books, physics books, stuff like that, but all the magical versions thereof. And this is the description, the lone power. The man who sat at the desk in the elegant office had his back to the door and was staring out the window into the dimness. His warty secretary handed him the phone, and he swiveled around in the high-backed chair to take, showing himself in profile. Nita stared at him, confused, as he picked up the phone. A businessman, young, maybe 30, and very handsome, red gold hair, clean-lined face above his trim, dark three-piece suit. Was this the Witherer, the kindler of wildflowers, the one who decreed darkness, the star snuffer? So at this point, I was really thinking this was some sort of weird environmental screed. It's a very animistic book. So animism, the idea that everything has life, and environmentalism, that businessmen equals bad. This is the view I got when I started, and when I got to this, it sort of backed up my idea that this was the idea of the book. And I was kind of, hey, this is a little flat, not a whole lot of depth to it. But as you read on, it's not as shallow as that. And as it's talking about him, Nita's like, he didn't look evil or sound that way, at least not to the right end. He keeps on talking to some guy on the phone. And Fred, the White Star, the White Hole, who obviously knows more because she's been around for a lot longer, and unlike these other guys, has been in there for a little more, been in the magic world for more than a month. I think Nita's only been a wizard for like a week at this point. Says, the Snuffer, which is a short name for the Star Snuffer, which is another name for the Lone Power, the Dark One. Whatever. The Snuffer was always glorious to look at before it scorned the light, and it kept the beauty afterwards. That's what the stars always used to say. The one reason it's dangerous to deal with, that one. The beauty seduces. And jumping a little further down, that's one's most terrible power, they say. His absolute conviction that he's right in what he does. After they get the book right from under the nose of this guy, who knows that they're in his world but isn't really doing a whole lot about it, he sends some ghouls basically after them. They then, with this book, or the Dark Book, are then able to find the location of the Light Book, which is guarded by basically a dragon. But this is a dragon who has been around so long he has Alzheimer's. Which I actually really enjoyed the idea of a dragon having Alzheimer's. Didn't think it was he was a dragon. They didn't know he was going to be a dragon. They thought he was going to be a small little thing. But he's collected his treasures, which is subway tokens and little plastic tchotchkes and things like that. And in his pile, to be guarded, given to him by the Dark One, is the Book of the Moonlight. They find their way to him, and they're like, hey, we need that book. And he's like, we can trade you this Dark Book. And he's like, this guy, the dragon's like, okay. And he's willing to trade it. But then he goes and he finds it. Once he finds it, he's like, no, this Book of the Light's way better than this Book of the Dark. And they're like, well, we can do a trade for it. And this dragon, the eldest, this dragon with Alzheimer's, he knows he's not there because one thing about dragons is they're supposed to know the size of his hoard, but he keeps forgetting, and he keeps worrying about thieves. He calls them thieves when he gets there. But they promise, hey, we'll do this trade. Not only will we trade, and you'll end up with a book nearly quite as good as this one, but we'll also make it so you can't be ever found again. And no one can ever get back to you, and no one can ever take your hoard. And he takes that as a trade. Basically, the idea is they warp time around. Basically, his little section of space they make into a bubble. They twist it around, and he's just can't be accessed anymore. Which he's perfectly okay with that idea. So they trade it. He gets the light of the moon. They run back with this new light, with this new book, are able to use this book, and because it has the power of creation, the power of all that's good, when they use their magic, they start a spell, and the spell is basically powered by the book. They don't need any of the normal things they would need. And whenever they start a spell, the spell is basically as if the book is using them to cast the spell, and they're only a conduit for it, basically. So they're able to, once again, find this portal, come back through it, and now they have the light, the book of the light of the moon. They get back into New York City, and they try to close the portal and realize they can't. The lone one, the Snarl Stuffer, is chasing after them, sending all of his ghouls after him. So they get into a park. They're able to read from this book, and then the Snarl Stuffer comes through the portal and snuffs out the star, snuffs out our sun. They have 8 minutes to read the book. They're reading through. As they do, first Kid is doing it, but as he's reading through it, he starts to fade, starts to become translucent, starts to disappear. So halfway through, Nita takes over and starts reading through the book. They are able to, before they start reading, cast spells that take all the trees and have the trees fight for them. Take all of the gargoyles and statues around, have them fight for them, fight off the horde of creatures that are coming in from this other world. But this book can only be read through the moonlight. The light's coming out from the moon, but they have 8 minutes, because the light takes 8 minutes from the star to reach the moon and come back. Right? They go, they read through it, then all of a sudden, 8 minutes after the Snarl Stuffer enters the world through the portal, they lose their moonlight. So they can no longer read the book. So Fred, this white star, who throughout this book has been emitting things, at one point, after he eats the pen, he accidentally starts emitting normal, instead of, light and gamma radiation and x-rays and all that stuff, starts emitting textbooks and desks and all sorts of regular things. As this dark one is coming in and the moonlight is gone and they can no longer read from the book of light, Fred goes and basically explodes, emitting his light, directing it at the moon. So it all hits the moon and it comes back as moonlight. So because it's now moonlight, they're then able to read through it, and through that are able to stave off long enough in order to allow this dark one to be. I started off thinking this was some sort of environmental screed, but there is more depth to it. First off, there's the idea of the good versus evil, which is a very common, I don't want to say trope, but concept, idea. The Book of Light, Book of Life, all these concepts, which made me think it has some sort of Christian allegory. Something I noticed comparing this book to Harry Potter is Harry Potter, in order to become a wizard, in order to get his powers, he has to go to Hogwarts. He goes to a school and needs to be trained, needs to be taught. This is very self-taught. They read a book. By reading the book and following what it says, you can figure it out. You can get the power. You don't need anyone teaching you. Sure, it's nice if they, at one point, go and meet some wizards, and the wizards go and tell them about it, and, give them a little bit of help. Sure, that helps, but you don't need it. What you need is you need the book. You get the book, you read the oath, you say some words, which is very the idea of Catholicism versus Protestant. Here is another book that I've read recently, Dinosaur Beach by Keith Lomer. I've read one or two books by Keith Lomer, and this is a book about time travel. And if you are a fan of Interception or other movies or books where you just keep getting deeper and deeper into it, it's about time travel, and not only time travel, but different agencies that are going back and trying to fix and understand what's going on in time travel. I would suggest this. It's a pretty short read. I read it, I don't know if I read it in a day, but if not longer than a day. If longer than a day, not a whole much longer. It gets a little weird there at the end, but just look at that cover. And if that cover doesn't get you, I do not know what will. Alrighty. This has been an episode of Chris Read a Book. Chris read this book. Chris read that book. Whatever the name of this channel is. With Chris. Cheers.